welcome to the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. I'm Deja Love, your host, and this is a podcast where we amplify Black women's voices as we discuss the many different ways we manage stress and maintain our well-being. We want to ensure that all Black women live productive, meaningful, and robust lives that are unhinged by stress. The goal of this podcast is not to perpetuate the myth of perfection, but to show progress by engaging in conversations with many different Black women and hear their stories on how they maintain their wellness amidst stress. This is an authentic podcast by authentic women. We are so excited that you are listening and you followed and liked us and are tuned into the episode. So sit back, listen, comment, and share this podcast. We're going to get right into today's episode, which our topic, as we're celebrating for the month of October, is Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. And today, specifically, how Black women caregivers can center their own wellness. I'm always excited to have guests here, and so happy to have you here, Taylor Nelson. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, wonderful. We're happy to have you. Our tradition is we ask every guest this first question. And the question is, you're a busy young professional navigating different work cultures. You're a family member. You're an active community member. Among the many other leadership roles that you have, how do you prioritize your own wellness and your energetic alignment amidst all of the demands in life?
Yeah, I'm really big on self-care, and I have a really robust self-care routine. And it actually started a few years ago. A therapist of mine, she came to me in the midst of when I was caretaking, and she really came to me and she helped me, and she said, I want you to create a self-care resume. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And she came and she said, basically, I want you to approach it the same way you would, a professional resume. And include your skills, include your experience, include your involvement, all that good stuff, but just swap out the information for what you do for yourself that's self-care related. So I said, okay, so that was my homework for the week. And I went home and I just put down what I thought was self-care. And then at our next session, she looked at me and she said, what is this? And I said, this is my self-care resume. And she said, no, this has nothing to do with you. This has everything to do with what you do for other people. So she told me to redo it and to really practice. And she said, this means that we need more work for you to do for yourself. And that honestly, her checking me in that way, honestly helped me to understand that I need to make more time for myself and that I need to add more to my resume for my self-care. And now I have a whole routine. My self-care resume is very filled. And what's included in that, I journal, if not every day, every other day. Prayer is really big for me. I have a close relationship with God. Me and him are like this. So I pray, if not every day, every hour. Spending time in nature and making sure that I get fresh air and that I'm moving my body. And I have a dance background, so moving my body through dance or yoga are both extremely important to me. Spending time with friends, but also spending time with myself, because I'm the type of person who can get overwhelmed really easily with social interactions and just I have a short social battery sometimes. So having time with myself and just solo dates and things of that nature. So that's my whole wellness check for me.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Taylor. I love that. A self-care resume. That's so interesting. Wow. And it's I love how your therapist, they came back and were like, no, this is what you're doing for other people. That's so interesting. What was that like when you're receiving that initial feedback and I think many of us, we pour, we give so much, especially as Black women. What was your initial response when you're like, but this is self-care, and she had to really challenge you to say, no, that's not.
I literally asked her, well, what do you mean? Like, what is missing? And I think just what you said, we're so used to helping other people and giving so much of ourselves, and acts of service is my love language. And I feel as though by giving to others, I'm serving myself because it makes me feel good. But that's not the same thing. And she had to break that down to me that you can still help other people, you can still serve, you could still, do kind things for other people. But when it's taking from yourself and you're pouring from an empty cup, how good are you really? And she really just checked me on it. And I was like, oh man, you got me. Like, I don't know what to do. So I really just had to take a step back and realize, what do I do for Taylor? And then that just started this whole journey of figuring out what can I do to pour into myself.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, you're so in tune, you know your love language. And I think so many of us, we get our energy from other people. And your therapist made such a good point. It's a both and. That's great that you get energy from other people, and that cannot be your own fulfillment and your own energetic alignment. Wow, that's such a good lesson, because I think sometimes we're like, oh, I'm community service, I'm supporting, and that's great. That's in tandem with, like you said, your self-care resume.
Right. Yep. She checked me real good.
That's good. You have a good therapist. All right.
I do. Great.
That is wonderful. And so, as we're talking about the topic here in October, Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, tell us, why is this month so special to you?
Yeah, so in January 2020, my mom was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer, and I was sophomore in college at the time, 19 years old, super young. And she had cancer for about 2.5 years. And then recently, a year ago, she passed away as a result of the cancer. So on September 13th, 2022, she passed away. And then her birthday was also 2 days later. So the whole month of Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month is connected to my mom and just has a super special meaning for me.
Oh, wow. I'm so sorry to hear that. And I just so appreciate you, Taylor, one, just sharing that. I mean, this is still very recent, so you're still going through the grief journey. There's not a finite end to it. It's very much the ebbs and the flows. So you just being here and sharing, it's just so meaningful, because many other women will hear this and they will really connect with you. And especially, I mean, as you talk about your self-care, like, no one would know. I mean, you're just so bright and shiny in the self-care resume. But to hear, this recent, I mean, that I just want to hold space. I don't want to just gloss over that. So I really honor you and appreciate you sharing that. And it's so amazing that this now, it seems like it's turning into a life passion for you, of trying to raise awareness. Before your mother passed away and developed cancer, was this on your radar? Was this something that you kind of had a personal interest in?
No, not at all, honestly. And I had no idea about how in-depth ovarian cancer goes and how it relates to the Black community and Black women. And my mom was a nurse. She was a registered nurse for like over 25 years. So I was always, in a space of healthcare and medicine and things like that. So I always had an awareness of various illnesses such as cancer. And there's been family members who have cancer before in my family, but never ovarian cancer. And even when, my mom first got diagnosed and had early signs and detection and things like that, the signs that she was looking at, I thought were just regular. I thought it was like gas pains. I thought it was, weight gain just because, but come to find out it was all connected to ovarian cancer. So it was such a huge learning lesson and a big learning curve, because it was so new to me. But now, like you said, it is something that I'm really forceful about to educate myself more on, but also just advocate more for it, especially out of respect for my mom, and just keep that going for her and in her honor. So yeah.
Right. Oh, wow. And that's so interesting to hear. Your mom was a nurse for a few decades. How is that? I mean, as she is now, the nurse becomes the patient. I mean, was she actively as a nurse, or was she retired when she was diagnosed?
She was active.
Oh,
wow. She was still an active nurse when she first got diagnosed. And then she retired April 2022. So like 6 months prior to her passing.
Oh,
so the majority of her diagnosis, she was still a nurse. And also this was in the midst of COVID. So it was just like a crazy time. But yeah, she was still a nurse, still going. And then how you were saying her becoming the patient was so interesting, because my mom she knew her stuff. She was
Mm-hmm.
not afraid to let you know that she knew her stuff.
Right.
And it's really interesting to see people in that position to, go through all these things. And she had chemo and
Mm.
had to do so many adjustments, and to see her take the step back because
Yeah.
she's so used to doing for others and so
Right.
being selfless and caring for other people, to see her take a step back and to be someone who needed to be served was such an interesting thing to watch. And I can only imagine how it was for her to, be on the receiving end of that.
Mm.
But then for me as her child to step in, to really step up and to help her was really interesting to see, but also, an honor to do as well.
Mm.
But yeah, it was really interesting to go through that.
Mm. What was, when you say it was interesting to see your mom as a nurse become a patient, what were some of the things that were interesting to you about that?
Yeah, seeing her ask for help. I've never
Mm.
seen my mom ask for help from nobody throughout my
Okay.
whole growing up. She was just that type of person that, and I think it's also attributed to the fact that as kids and just growing up, when you have parents, I feel like so often we view them as a superhero,
Mm.
and I think my mom was my superwoman in that sense. And to
Mm.
see her in a more of a human way rather than
Mm.
a superhero way was really crazy, because we think that they're so resistant to pain and to
Mm.
needing anything or needing anyone, and they could just take over the world. And she could, but at the same time, she was a human being who needed help.
Yeah.
And to see her ask for help was such a crazy experience, because I've never seen her do that before. I've always seen her be the person that people go to when they need help and when they need service of any kind. So
Mm.
seeing her ask for help, seeing her go through, the symptoms of chemotherapy was also
Mm.
interesting. And to see her need, in the later stages of her diagnosis when she was in hospice care and needing a hospice nurse herself, like needing a nurse for a nurse,
Mm.
is just so
Mm.
crazy to witness. Yeah, I think seeing her in a human way and have to need
Mhm.
service from other people was probably the most interesting part.
Mm. Yeah. Where when she, as you mentioned, the different nurses, as I'm sure they would find out that she was a nurse, was her care a little different? Because, they, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
And she never told them until later
Okay.
on. So no one really knew, no one up until she was in hospice care knew that she was a nurse. And
Oh.
that was interesting as well, to see that once they did find out her profession, just like the little adjustments that people would do,
Mm.
or even before, I think people caught on to it because they would be telling her medication, for example, and she would be like, "Oh, I know what that is," and she would
Mhm.
repeat it back, or she would say a different name for it, things
Mm.
like that. So I think over time, people assumed that she had some type of profession, in the healthcare system. And then I remember when she was in hospice in the hospital at first, prior to coming to our home, she was just, going through different changes, and the doctors kept coming in, explaining what's going on. And she said, "Listen, I'm a nurse. I know what this is. I know what you're doing to me. I know what
Mm.
medication you gave me yesterday." And everyone
Mm.
was just like, "Whoa, like, where were you a nurse? Where did you work at?"
Mhm.
And it's just like, after you had that distinction, people kind of
Mhm.
upped their game a little bit because
Yeah.
they knew that you have someone here who knows what's going on. So
Right.
it's very interesting to see that distinction come to play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing that, I mean, your mom was a nurse just so that she can hold folks accountable, and she could call them out if they were giving her subpar care. I mean, she was a decorated nurse, so she could challenge them. That had to have been really interesting, like you said, to see and witness.
Yeah, and it made me proud too, to
Mm.
be a woman who is my mom, but who's also just a Black woman in medicine, knows what she's talking about, and
Mm.
also with the circumstances. She's on medication herself.
Yeah.
She's losing weight, she's losing all these other things, she's going through these challenges, and also facing and preparing for what's to come. And she
Yeah.
still has the strength and the power to stick up for herself and be like, no, like this is what needs to happen. This is what,
Right.
and I was in awe of just her strength and her capability to still articulate herself so powerfully and eloquently in the midst of
Mm.
such chaos and a relatively, sad situation. So I was proud of her. I was like, well, she's losing her hair, or she may be losing weight, but she did not lose her mind. And that is so
Right.
important,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it was great to see.
Oh, that's amazing. Dude, what was your mom's experience with her colleagues? Because you mentioned she was working up until that point. So did her colleagues know about, because it seems like she would have to maybe have different shifts for her own treatment and her own medical appointments?
Yeah, they definitely were aware for that very reason. And then especially coworkers that she was very close with
Hmm.
knew from the beginning. Some of them went to her first chemotherapy appointment,
Oh.
things like that. So they were very privy to what was going on. And especially in the midst of COVID, she was out of work for, I want to say, the first 6 or 7 months of her diagnosis because she was going through rapid chemotherapy. But then
Hmm.
when she was cleared to go back, she couldn't work with the COVID patients. She couldn't
Hmm.
work with certain patients. So I think that took a hit on her a little bit because my
Hmm.
mom was the type of person who just wanted to help everybody,
Yeah.
especially during that time in the pandemic. Hospitals were so understaffed and just going through all these crazy changes. And I think she just had this eagerness to want to help, but she couldn't
Hmm.
because of her own health concerns. But yeah, her coworkers were extremely helpful, and even all the way down to her last few days, they were helpful not only as a nurse but as a friend, and just
Hmm.
that was really special for my mom. But yeah, they're the best, and I still am in contact with them to this day and have that
Oh,
relationship with
wow.
them now. So yeah, it's cool. And even at my mom, we had a little memorial service in her honor after she
Oh,
passed. All the nurses showed up in their scrubs.
oh, I
Like
love that.
little nurse gang in the corner. It was so beautiful to see all the blue scrubs and just all of them showing so much love and so much support to her and to our family. So yeah.
Oh, that's special. That's so special. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And caretaking, which we'll talk more of, but it is a massive undertaking that I think people, even just the words caretaking, minimizes how much of a toll it takes emotionally, mentally, and physically. So how, and I guess this is a two-part question, as you mentioned at the start that you have your therapist recommended a self-care resume. Now, was that before your mom's diagnosis and treatment? Or I wonder if that's a recent thing, but during the caretaking phase of your mom, like how were you able to have the emotional support, maintain a positive outlook, as well as your own wellness, so that, as you mentioned at the start of our conversation, it would be impossible to pour from an empty cup, and especially to support your mom during this time.
Yeah, the self-care resume came around the same time that my mom was diagnosed.
Okay.
Because since it was around COVID, I had to go home for school and I did virtual school for the first time in the middle of the
Okay.
pandemic. So it all happened pretty much at the same time. And I told my therapist, I was like, look, like I'm in the house for God knows how long. My mom is going through what she's going through. And it was just my mom and I in the home at the time. So I was like, okay, like something's got to give. Like I need
Mm.
help, and that's when I sought out therapy. And she told me right away, she's like, look, we need to get this self-care resume going,
Mm.
figure this out, and we need you to have the resources that you need. And then to the point about what I did to maintain just my positive outlook and just my sanity, honestly, I feel like my mom did a really good job at setting the tone from the beginning of how
Mm.
she wanted to go through this. And I think I was always really aware and respectful of like, what's the best way I can support you? And that will help me to figure out, where I fall into this. And she
Mm.
told me from the beginning, she said, listen, I'm living with cancer. I'm not dying from cancer. I
Mm.
said, okay. And as soon as she said that, it kind of did a switch with my mindset of like, okay, like this is a very sad and new experience for me, but my
Mm.
mom's still alive. She still has so
Mm.
much life, so much love,
Mm.
so much joy within her. What can I do to make this an easier experience for both me and for her? And I
Mm.
think in the midst of caretaking, even on the difficult days, because it is super challenging mentally and physically, I think I just found the good in all things. And I
Mm.
found ways to laugh with her. I found ways to connect with her deeper. I found ways to get her out the house and to learn new things. And I really think I took advantage of that time because there were so many moments where my mom and I couldn't, do certain things because I was away at college or because she was busy with work schedules and things
Mm.
like that. But to be her caretaker and to spend that intimate time with her, I think I just found the moments to kind of build off of that and bond
Mm.
with her more. And also, I think we had this really cool connection with each other. And I told her, I was like, listen, like, we're going to get through this. We're going to get through
Mm.
this together. We're going to make the best of it. And even down to her final days, we were laughing, we were
Mm.
talking, one day we were in the hospital. We had Sex and the City on the TV. My mom was talking about margaritas with salt on the rim. Like we just, it's like things are rough and life is lifing right now, but we're going to make the best of it and we're going to smile through it. And one of my favorite sayings is that, we're all just walking each other home. And I think I find myself really lucky and really blessed to know that I walked my mom home and that I knew where she was going. And home for me is heaven, and home with me is anywhere that God is and resides. And I think knowing that I made sure that she got there safely and that I walked her there, and the same with my siblings, we all walked our mom home. And I feel really honored to know that I did that. And I think that just kept me going. And also just my faith. Like, I don't think I could have got through any of this without my faith and without prayer and without my relationship with God. And sometimes you just have to let go of that control and just trust. That's honestly the hardest part sometimes. You just want to control everything and fix and just make her better. But that's not how life works all the time. So learning to lean into the lack of control, lean into the trust was the best thing for me mentally, because at that point I was like, you know what? It's not in my hands, it's in his. I know where she's going. If she does leave me in the physical world, I know where she's going, and she's in the best hands possible. So that's just how I viewed it at the time. And still today, I think that's what keeps me relatively positive and sane and calm. It's just knowing where she's at,
right,
and what she's doing. Like, she's watching me, and I told her, even in those last few days when, she was getting a little bit emotional because she knew what the possibility was leading to. I told her, I was like, you got the best seat in the house. Like, you get to watch me, you get to help me, you get to have a hand and navigate different aspects of my life. So it's like, there's joy in it all, and I think having that mentality of going home and knowing that I'll see her one day, and that this life isn't owed to any of us, and that we're all just passing through, and that we all have to end up somewhere eventually, I think really helped me a lot.
Wow. That's I'm taking it all in, and I laugh, not laughing, but that is powerful, Taylor. I just your whole paradigm of really challenging situation, not just any cancer diagnosis, but during a pandemic where healthcare was just really, it's inherently fragmented, but was even more so because of just being understaffed, and your ability to just, like you said, you were in the hospital with your mom, laughing and joking. I mean, I think many people will hear this and they will say, how was she able to do that? And just even as you speak of it, it's so energetically lifted. It's not somber. I mean, that's really powerful. And I mean, even me personally, I'm like, wow, because sometimes in the world today, I can become a negative Nancy with all the things going on, and that's just really amazing. I mean, you've answered the questions. There's no question. I'm just expressing like that's really amazing. I think many of us, we struggle with what we see with all that's going on to try to maintain a higher vibration. And it sounds like your mom really instilled that in you very early on, way before this, but very early on.
Yeah, for sure. I think she was just the perfect example of what love looks like, and also just the perfect example of what being a woman of love looks like. So having that representation growing up, and also my mom was a single mother and did all these things on her own, and to see just how she navigated through those challenging times. She was always positive. She very rarely complained. She was just like a person of like, all right, we just got to keep going. We just got to keep doing this. And I think I've learned from that. And I think I've also learned from, her downfalls as well. She wasn't the best at taking breaks. She wasn't the best at asking for help. And I think learning from the good and, the not so good aspects has just helped me to navigate within my own challenges with my mom, and to understand that, life happens to all of us, and it happens to us, not for us, and all these things, and understanding that it gets better. Everything's temporary. Everything happens for our greater good. So, yeah.
Wow, you have such a positive outlook. That's really amazing. And what you were talking about earlier about really the challenge for many people is releasing that control. Is we want the control, especially as you and I are in DC, and it's such a controlling environment where people think that
Yeah.
they have control based on their pedigree, where they come from, their jobs, all of those things. How were you able to really just release that attachment? Because that's what it sounds like. Release that attachment of physically wanting your mom present and just saying, this is not going the way we thought. As your mom said, I am living with cancer, not dying from cancer. And it took a different turn. Like, how are you able to just release that control? I mean, you had no control, but sometimes people will still fight and say, well, I'm going to get a third opinion. I'm going to ask the Georgetown doctors, oncology,
Right.
all those things. It sounds like you had a radical acceptance.
Yeah, I think that's attributed to my faith again, because I
Mm,
think sometimes we don't realize that our prayers are being answered because the outcome is not the way that we thought it would be. But
mm,
when you look back on it, everything that I've ever prayed for has always come into fruition, even in
mm,
the case of my mom, because especially when it was coming down to the last few days and things were just getting, a little chaotic, and you're just seeing someone that you love so much and care about just slowly leave you. And it's a
mm,
really interesting place to be in. And I think I remember distinctly being at my home because that's where my mom completed hospice care, and
mm,
just seeing her, go through all of these things prior to leaving us in the physical world. And I was just like, God, just take her.
mm,
Like if that is your will, just take her. If it is your will to take her out of suffering,
mm,
that is what I want. My
mm,
main prayer was, I don't want my mom to suffer. I want her to be at peace.
mm,
I remember praying that for the 5 days that she was in hospice. I said, Lord, just take her out of suffering and bring her to peace. And he
mm,
answered that prayer. And, people can take that for however way they want. But for
mm,
me, I looked at it as God heard me praying. He saw the condition that my mom was in, and he took her out of that and brought her to a better place. And
mm,
I feel like there were so many signs and little nuances throughout her entire diagnosis that was so evident to me that prayers are being answered.
mm,
And, of course, I would love my mom to be here with me in the physical world, but I know that where she's at, she's never going to suffer again. She
mm,
will never be in pain again.
mm.
She'll never have any of these aches and pains and any of these responsibilities ever again. And that she's
Yeah.
happy, she's probably dancing, probably
Mhm,
cooking, just living her best life up there. And I
mhm.
think knowing and having that understanding that prayers get answered in the way that they're intended to be, not in the way that we want them to be,
Right.
helped me to release that control a lot, because I was like, you know what? Things are going to work out the way that God wants them to. My
Mm.
prayers are going to be answered the way they're supposed to be. So why am I going crazy and literally running laps around my head
Yeah.
to figure
Yeah.
out how I can control this? So yeah.
Yeah, no, I love that. And with your mom being a nurse, and as you mentioned, it was really challenging in those last few days when she had the awareness of, okay, this is what's happening. I'm transitioning. What was that like for your mom as a nurse because I wonder, I mean, I feel like she had to have probably known because she's a clinician. And so she knew when maybe the chemo or radiation wasn't working. And then, the next phase is, how does she make peace with that?
Yeah, I think she made peace with it really early on.
Really?
She honestly accepted it earlier than any of us, like any family
Mm,
member. And I remember we were in the hospital. It was just the two of us, and I spent the night with her, and we were like cuddled up in the bed watching
mm,
TV, and we just had a really open and candid conversation about death, about
mm,
different possibilities. And she had the most positive outlook on it, and
mm,
I have a very positive outlook on death as well. So it was just a really beautiful conversation that we had about, I'm gonna be up there dancing, and she was
mhm,
saying what she's gonna see up there, and just all these beautiful things, so that when we were in the final days at our
yeah.
house, and things were happening really rapidly, she was so open and just ready
Mm,
to go whenever God was ready to take her. And I
mm,
think that helped all of us as well,
yeah.
watching it happen, but just to know that she was okay with it and that she was
Right.
able to go whenever she was meant to. And also as a nurse, she knew what was going on more than the nurses, her own hospice nurse,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
was really funny. But I think also made her feel more comfortable too, to know like, oh, well, I know what this is. I know what's going on.
Right. Right.
But yeah, it was great to be exposed to that and to know
Hmm.
she had such a positive view on the whole thing.
Yeah. That's wonderful. That just that as she instilled in you and your siblings, just that death is a process of life, that it's not the end. And I love that because sometimes we want to hold on and it's like, no, we don't. But it's as you're saying, we cannot control it. And knowing that it's a part of our life journey, that it's just one phase transitioning into a spiritual realm, that's just really beautiful. I really thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. And I want to shift a little bit as we talked about your experience, caretaking for your mom. What do you wish you could see? Because unfortunately, not all caretakers have this positive experience that you've had. And is there legislation, policy, or what? Because there are many caretakers that are challenged, that don't have, like you are so amazingly blessed, you had a therapist during this time. And there are many caretakers that don't access the services for many reasons because we still don't make therapy accessible, all the reasons that we won't get into. But what do you think could help, especially as we're celebrating Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. And I'm sure there are millions of caretakers and they are not having the same experience. What do you wish could happen so that other people could have a very positive, uplifting experience that you and your mom had?
Yeah, I wish that we could have more communities that are geared
Mm,
towards caretakers specifically because I feel as though it takes a village, and I feel like
mm,
we see that a lot with children, we see that a lot with families and family systems, but I feel like sometimes we don't see that a lot within the medical profession or within caregivers and things like that. And sometimes you have a whole team. And I know for
mm,
me, we had not only myself but my siblings, we had a social worker that we were working with, we had the
mm,
hospice nurse that we were working with. I had a therapist that I was working with for myself. And it's just you meet so many people to help
mm,
you. And I feel like sometimes that community and that sense of tribe is lacking within that community. And
mm.
also just the conversation, I feel like is so overlooked about
Yeah.
caretakers and just about different types of caretakers.
Mm,
I know for myself, I was 19 at the time, and fast forward now, I'm 23. And to be so young, to have gone through
yeah.
college, to have, being a young adult, you don't really see a lot or don't really hear about a lot of stories from the perspective of a young adult who is a caretaker.
That's
And I
true.
think, just having that acknowledgement and understanding that sometimes our resources need to be tweaked depending on the person and where that person is in their own life. And I say that all the time because I feel like when you think about a caretaker, sometimes there's a certain image that we have,
Right. It's true.
and it's like it's not
Yeah.
a one size shoe fits all type of
It's true.
situation.
Yeah.
I know that from my own experience. I don't think I look like the typical caretaker that we hear
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And I feel like that just says a lot that we just need to kind of tweak our system and tweak and understand where those gaps lie and have that conversation about what's the best way that we can offer help and support and community to
Mm.
caretakers of all ages and all phases of life.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. That's such a good point. You bring up a really good point because I think, especially you as a Gen Z, I think there are many more, but we think in our brains, like caretaker, there's a stereotypical association. You're a baby boomer, you're a Gen Xer. You don't think a Gen Z would be caretaking, but we know that there are many Gen Z caretakers, and a lot of the resources, like you said, are not really tailored for a younger audience. That's a really great point. I think it's as we're seeing the baby boomer Gen Xers aging and having more chronic conditions, it's going to grow. There will be many millions of more younger caretakers that may not know, as you said, the community that you can utilize a social worker to really help coordinate all the care and the resources and all the other supports.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm hopeful that things will change in that direction and that more resources can be offered for all different type of caretakers. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I have hope.
Yes, yes. And your hope is infectious. So we have hope as well. How has this experience caretaken for your mom and especially the platform that you're amplifying that we need to have a more inclusive understanding of caretaking? How has that informed you professionally? We talked a lot about personally and how, you're rooted spiritually and just your positive outlook. But how do you think that informs the work that you do professionally? Because you're in an adjacent field.
Yeah, so I'm currently in healthcare policy, and it's so interesting because prior to when my mom was first diagnosed, I wasn't in this field. I had a
Okay.
psychology background, and coming into the healthcare space and the health policy space, I think it honestly just lit a fire under me because
Mm,
I have a view of just the healthcare system as a whole and the
yeah.
overview of it. So I can very clearly see where gaps exist,
Mm,
where more research is necessary and things like that. So it's really interesting and also to see how I have a passion for community work, passion
mm,
for communities and working with Black and Brown people, and to see and to have that personal experience within my own family
yeah.
to now go out in the work field, it's like we have so much work to do.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. We do.
so much work to do. We still have so far to come, but there's still that hope that exists. And I think taking from my personal life to my professional life, it's just the understanding that you never know what goes on behind closed doors.
Yeah. That's true.
So with a professional lens added onto that, it's like, okay, then what can we do to go into those little nuances of people's lives to really offer help and support? Where can the research grow more? Where are
Mm,
those gaps in the literature? What can we do within the medical system, within the healthcare system as a whole? How are we helping these people that actually need help? And how are we bringing a voice to the voiceless? And
mm,
I think it just makes me want to do more. It makes me eager to do more research, makes me eager to dive into it more. And I think having had that personal experience, I think gives me more access to things because I have,
mm,
both the professional and the personal life and that
right.
experience come together. And I think hopefully, I think it helps me to be better equipped to help people because I'm coming from my academic background and my
Right.
professional background, but I also have lived experience, which is so valuable, and
Yes.
oftentimes so overlooked. And honestly, lived experience is where it's at as far as getting
Yes, it
through
is.
things. So, yeah, I have a fire lit under me, and I'm excited to see where it takes me, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I am too. That's so exciting. I always say, I feel like you Gen Zs are just, you are the hope because you all are like challenging the systems that a lot of us millennials have accepted, that we think that we've challenged them, but your generation is challenging in a whole new way. And it's just so exciting and really encouraging to see, really. I want to also shift again and put on my public health cap here just a
Mhm.
little bit, is that as we're celebrating and recognizing Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month, what many people may not know is that according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, that ovarian cancer, it's the second most common gynecologic cancer in the United States. And it causes the most deaths out of any other cancer of women's reproductive system. And what I want to ask you is, given that, is how can we increase our awareness of ovarian cancer? Specifically, because Black women in particular, CDC recommends these really specific diagnostic testing, which is really outside of the standard if you have an OBGYN doing your annual PAP or pelvic exam. CDC's diagnostic recommendations, it's a rectal vaginal pelvic exam. It could be a transvaginal ultrasound, and then a really specific blood test, the CA-125. How do you think that more Black women can have heightened awareness? Because as I talked about, like these diagnostic tests, I had not heard of them. I did a little bit I'm in public health. I had to do a little bit of research and I was not aware that those are specific. And to add to that, I know this is a really layered question, but the pap smear, it does not check for ovarian cancer. That screens for cervical cancer. That's a huge, I think, public health in terms of our communications. That's a disconnect because I think a lot of women think, oh, I've done my pap, my pelvic, I'm good. And that is not the case. So what are your thoughts as you are, burgeoning a health policy expert, what we can do to really increase awareness for Black women?
Yeah, there's so much. There's so much that needs to be done. And I think so many things. So I think it starts with the conversation, but I think in order to get to that point, we need the education behind it, right? And in order to have the education, we need the right people to talk to. And
Yeah.
that's where it gets a little tricky sometimes because we need our practitioners, we need our providers, we need our experts to really come into play and say, this is what y'all need to know and this is what y'all need to do. But sometimes it's hard to get to that point because I think, at least within the Black community and amongst Black women, we have such a fear and such a valid fear within the medical system and within healthcare because
Mm.
oftentimes our voice is not heard and
Yeah.
oftentimes our issues are just diminished and pushed to the side.
Hmm.
That's a whole nother issue to
Yeah.
tap into. But I think that plays a really big role into why, access and why survival rates of ovarian cancer and other types of illnesses are so geared towards the Black community and towards Black women is because that fear is centered there. And
Mm.
in order for us to actually make progress, we need to address that and we need to also understand why that exists.
Mm.
And I think that's going to take a long time and that, other things need to happen for that to come into fruition. But in the meantime, I just want to encourage Black women to continue to use our voice because
Mm.
our intuition and that gut feeling is no joke when it comes
Mm.
to our body and when it comes to early detection. And there's so many signs, there's abdominal pain, there's fatigue, there's rapid weight loss and weight gain and back pain and all these things that are early signs of ovarian cancer, but we just attribute it to different things. But
Mm.
I know as a woman myself, and in my mom's situation, she knew right away when something was off. Like when we know,
Mm.
we know. And I
Yeah.
wanted to just trust that feeling and trust that gut intuition more often because
Mm.
I personally think 9 times out of 10, that's what leads to the early detection and the early signs, anyways, when we take the initiative to listen to ourselves and to trust
Yeah.
our bodies. And I think if our practitioners and our providers don't, then we will, and we have to
Mm.
continue to do so.
Yeah.
And I think also just having the promotion and the awareness of ovarian cancer, because I think so many people don't know about it. So many
Yeah.
people don't know about the awareness month. So many people
Yeah.
don't know about the signs. So just kind of pushing it out there more often. And there's so many places out there that do amazing research, that have amazing
Yeah.
resources, and that are really doing the work. And I know from my experience, I was in college. I had no idea what ovarian cancer looked like. I had no
Mm.
idea what was going on. And I was like, I need some help. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
looked into the Ovarian Cancer Research Alliance, who do
Mm.
incredible work with research and also with funding for families and for patients. And it was just a great resource for me to look at when, A, just to educate myself, but also to understand, what's to expect and how can I properly equip myself to help with myself and help with my mom. And I think more people need to take that initiative to go out and to do the research because sometimes we have to do it on our own. If they
Yeah.
won't push it out, if they won't talk about it, and sometimes we have to dive into that. But I also ask and look at our practitioners and look at I look at our doctors, look at our providers and ask them, how can you best serve your patients so that we can know more about this? Because
Right.
I feel like female health in particular, sometimes it's very hush hush about certain aspects about it until you're
Yeah.
actually in the situation. And I feel like it's the responsibility of all of our practitioners to really own that and to really take it into their own hands for the health of their patients. So
Right.
we have so much work to do.
Yes, we do. We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, and it's, you're in health policy. I advocate that there need to be more policies that some of these screening and
Yeah.
diagnosis tests insurance should reimburse, that it should be just like how with the Affordable Care Act, a lot of the preventative health measures, like how an annual pap exam or pap smear is now it's free, it's covered, and you don't need insurance. You can get that as a woman's wellness exam. The same thing for ovarian cancer, and I don't know if that currently exists. I think that's something that folks are still fighting and advocating for.
Yeah, for sure. And just having those ultrasound screenings and things like that. Like
Hmm.
it's necessary in order to have those early detection signs and things like that. And like you were saying, insurance sometimes is not accessible to all of us,
Yeah,
especially within the
yeah,
Black community. And that's just something that should be unacceptable. But
yeah.
yeah, still have a long way to go. But I think if we just do the work and sometimes just trust ourselves, we
Mm.
may be able to get there.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. What are your closing words, and what last things do you want to share with our listeners, our audience? I mean, this has been such a great conversation.
Yeah, I guess I would end it with two things. So my mom, she told me when she first got diagnosed, she said, Tay, I want you to live your life and be happy.
Mm.
Okay, I don't know how I'm gonna do that without you. Here we go.
Mm.
But here I am a year later, and I think I would encourage everyone to do as my mom instructed, is just live your life and be happy. And whatever
Mm,
means you have to do so. And also to keep in mind that you never know what someone goes home to, don't know what someone's nights look like, and to just extend kindness as often, as frequently as you can.
mm,
So lastly, if you have the privilege of having a mom or a dad or an auntie or a grandma or just someone that you care about, a guardian that you really love, I just encourage you to speak to them as often as you can and to just
mm,
give them a phone call, be intentional about it, have
mm.
that time. Because like I said, this life isn't owed to any of us and time is very fleeting. And I just hope that if you have the privilege to do so, because I've recognized that it is a privilege to just hear someone's voice and make that phone call,
Yeah,
just encourage everyone to do so and do it often and
yeah,
listen to it, love it, be present during it, and to just take it all in.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Live your life and be happy.
Yep.
Such good
That's simple.
words. Such good words that your mom left us with.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. How can folks reach you? I'm sure after listening to this episode, they're going to want to connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I would love that. So I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Taylor Nelson. I should pop up, I think. And then
Mhm.
also on Instagram, I'm available, Taylor Nelson with two N's underscore. Yeah, those are probably the most active on those two socials. But
Okay, that sounds great. Taylor, thank you so much for being here on the podcast. I just truly appreciate you being so open and so vulnerable and transparent and really sharing your heart. Thank you so much.
thank you so much for having me, giving me this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're most welcome. And thank you all for listening to this episode of the Black Women's Wellness Podcast. Continue to check out our upcoming episodes, subscribe, follow, like, and connect with us on our website, thebwwa.com. We want to hear from you. What resonates from this episode for our great conversation with Taylor? Drop us a comment. We are active on Instagram. Our handle is the BWWAINC. We love engaging with you, so leave us a comment. And until next time, stay well and remember our wellness is infinite. Take care.